Continuing now with our lead story, the use of coerced interrogation in order to save American lives. Joining us from Washington, former advisor to President Clinton, Lanny Davis. From Los Angeles, Fox News analyst Leslie Marshall. So, Leslie, you just heard Mark Thiessen, and we have the 6 primary sources all saying coerced interrogation helped bring down bin Laden. Are you ready to cede that point?
Well, I have no problem admitting with people who are sources and eyewitnesses that I am not, Bill, saying that these events and this type of interrogation led to the capture of Osama bin Laden. I don't have a problem with that. However, I do believe, based on information that I have found, including in 2003 when military intelligence was sent to Iraq, that they found 9 out of 10 people that they interrogated gave up the same information,
okay, but now
whether they used traditional methods.
You're wandering into the valley of theory.
I'm sorry.
All right, yeah, we want to stay away from the valley of theory. That's not a good valley to be in when you have a very specific case, Lanny, that is, you know, a part of American history now. So, you know what the New York Times said today. You know what Alan Coleman said on this broadcast. They would absolutely simply refuse, no matter how overwhelming the evidence, to cede the point that the Bush administration policies of coerced interrogation did help this nation. And you say, Lanny?
Well, I wrote today that we have to give credit to George Bush and those that use these techniques for getting information that directly or indirectly led to the death of Osama bin Laden. I don't think there's any way to deny that. I have also written doubts about violating written law against torture, and we're between a rock and a hard place, but we have to give credit where credit is due. George Bush's enhanced interrogation techniques, as well as the terrorist surveillance program, both of which I had legal doubts about, were effective in the killing of
and
Osama bin Laden.
That is a subject that can be debated in law schools around the country, and perhaps the Supreme Court someday will have to deal with that, and that's fine. I have no beef with that. But there are, Leslie, people on the left who and I know the New York Times among them, that basically said, look, we don't care whether this interrogation worked. We don't care. It's wrong. We should never do it, even if it does save American lives. And then Dennis Miller said something, as I mentioned, very brilliant last night. He believes it's immoral if you don't use it because there are lives on the line. How do you answer that, Leslie?
As an American who cares about the men and women overseas, I think it's immoral if we don't look at how we could possibly be endangering their lives.
They're already in danger,
I also think
Leslie.
it's immoral.
The Al-Qaeda kills captives and civilians. You know that. So does the Taliban. No prisoner of war camps. They kill them. So that is a specious argument. That argument doesn't hold. They beheaded our people, journalists and military people. They brutalize them when they're captured. There are no Geneva Conventions in play. So we have to throw that argument out the window, do we not?
Why do we sign a Geneva Convention then,
because
Bill? What makes us stand head and shoulders above the rest of the world?
War. This is not. This is a war on terror with no uniforms and no rules.
So we should stoop to the level of those that we are fighting, stoop to the level of our enemy? I think it's very reasonable, Leslie, to give the President of the United States and him only. Now, Lanny, you advise the President of the United States. Would you feel uncomfortable with giving a President of the United States the power, only him, to order coerced interrogation supervised by the White House? Would you feel uncomfortable with that?
I guess I would feel uncomfortable if I was advising the president to violate the law, but I would also cite Alan Dershowitz, a great liberal professor at Harvard who wrote a book about torture and cited the example, Leslie, if there were a ticking time bomb and it was an atomic bomb, would you support torture to find out where that atomic bomb was? And of course, the moral answer is yes. So there's no clear answer here other than if we want to allow this, we ought to make it lawful and not put CIA agents at risk with an ambiguous situation. They ought to know they're not going to be prosecuted.
I think that's a good idea. I think Congress should pass a law that says precisely that the President of the United States has the power in a national security emergency to order these kinds of techniques and then list the techniques. Would you oppose that, Leslie?
You know, I guess it would depend who the president is, to be honest with you, Bill.
You would oppose.
I fear the slippery slope. I fear the slippery slope. I really do. Yes.
All right,
I fear the slippery slope. I mean, that's like a dictatorship, isn't it?
No, it's not. You're obviously giving the power to one man who is elected by the people of the United States and can be unelected 4 years later.
Bill,
and then the president has a lot of powers that, you don't say, well, if I like you, you get them, and if I don't, you don't. Go ahead, Lonnie.
No, it's not about that. It's too much power for one person.
The one thing I would suggest to my friend Leslie and fellow Democrats is this is not the moment to take cheap shots at George Bush or the Bush administration. We are one nation, finally. Maybe we had a 48-hour timeout. And we should give credit to the Bush administration for helping to find bin Laden. Certainly a lot of this stuff that led to bin Laden began under George Bush. Instead, I'm hearing some Democrats just making cheap shots, which is the culture that we're in, unfortunately. But let's have a timeout, and at least Democrats and Republicans should be praising Barack Obama for the courage and his leadership, and George Bush for contributing to what happened.
All right. Leslie, Lanny, thanks very much. Directly ahead.